Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. During the course of 2016, Israel has faced numerous challenges, both near and far. To discuss those challenges, I'm joined here in the studio by Dr. Kobi Michael, a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies. Welcome. I'd like also to welcome our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren. And I'd like also to welcome Dr. Reuven Berko, a columnist at the Israel Hayom Daily. Welcome. Dr. Michael will touch base indeed on the lone wolf attacks as they were defined at the beginning, which started in October of 2015. How much of a challenge was that for Israel? It, of course, was a long period of time. Give us a little bit an understanding of whether the Israeli government is satisfied and as well the security echelons with regard to the countering of this challenge. And do we today look backwards with the prospects of a success or rather a failed endeavor which needs to be learned from?
Generally speaking, I think that we can speak about a success, about being able to contain the violence and to prevent eruption. Although we were witnessing fluctuations during the year, and we saw that Israel was required to be very, I would say, patient and very sober, understanding that this is a sort of a phenomenon that cannot be dealt with too much force. In this regard, the idea was to use force in wisdom, and I think that that immediately the Palestinian Authority understood that this eruption of violence might be much more dangerous for the future stability of the Palestinian Authority as such, and therefore they did their efforts in order to prevent the escalation of violence. And I think that with a perspective of a year or so that we have about the events, I think that it was something in a minor scale, although each loss of life, it's something which is a tragedy. But generally speaking, and from a broader strategic point of view, I think that the phenomenon was contained, and it is not something that can be considered as a strategic threat.
Dr. Michael, how do you perceive the Gaza Strip during the course of 2016?
I think that the situation is a bit more complicated, and this is a sort of catch-22. Because, first of all, when we are talking about Hamas, we are not talking about a very monolithic movement, okay? There are some severe rifts between the so-called military wing and the political wing. And even in the political wing, there are some rifts between the inside leadership and the outside leadership. And these are not rifts only, or splits only about some minor issues. These are splits about very major issues. This is a split, first of all, about the priorities, okay? Because the priority of the military wing is establishing their or improving their military capabilities, because they see the mukawama, or the armed resistance, as the main goal toward the implementation of the grand vision, okay? Which, by the way, is something in common for them and for the political leadership, but they use different strategies. And therefore, they cooperate with Wilayat Sina, which is affiliated with the Islamic State, and which is angered the Egyptians, and they prefer the Iranians as their political and military supporter or patron, where the political leadership prefers the Turkey-Qatari axis, which is opposed to the Iranians. They prefer to be accountable, as Amir said, to their constituency, to the population in Gaza, and to behave in a responsible manner as the ruling power. And they prefer to improve their relations with Egypt and Saudi Arabia, which are in a collision, okay, with Iran on the one side, but there is a very severe tension also between Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey, because they are fighting about the hegemony in the Gaza Strip or in the region, generally speaking. And Israel and the local population is just in the middle of all of this very, I would say, chaotic situation, okay? So Israel eventually is, at least for the time being, the only serious address for the reconstruction process of the Gaza Strip, but Israel cannot do it alone. And if Israel would like to assist or to promote the reconstruction of Gaza Strip, it means that Israel assists Hamas. If Israel assists Hamas, due to the zero-sum game between Hamas and the PA, strengthening Hamas, meaning that you are going to weakening the PA, and the PA is still the Israeli preference.
מכאל?
I think that the phenomenon of ISIS is something that that we really have to feel very concerned about, because this is something that first of all affects the stability of Egypt. I mean the hinterland of Egypt, or the motherland, because it has a sort of a habit, a very bad habit, you know, not to remain only in the peripheral areas, but to penetrate to the motherland, to the. And secondly, it is an element that destabilizes the region, and I think that as long as the Egyptians are not able to tackle this challenge, we have to refer to the Egyptians, at least with regard to Sinai Peninsula, as a failed state, okay, or as a very fragile state, and all the phenomenon of fragile or failed states is something that became to be very familiar in the last 6 years from the first outbreak of the so-called Arab Spring, or the Arab upheaval. And we understand that failed states are not only local challenge, or not only local problem. They have a sort of a habit or tendency to be tremendous exporters, okay, of troubles to the broader region. Instability, terrorism, refugees, and therefore a failed state in Syria or a failed state in Libya becomes very soon to be a European problem, okay? And I think that we should do all the possible efforts, and when I say we, I mean Israel, Saudi Arabia, and mainly maybe the United States, in order to enable the Egyptians to tackle successfully this challenge in Sinai. The world. Okay?
One word, because we're short.
The Frankenstein syndrome, okay? We have to remember that the creators of ISIS, the creators of Al-Qaeda, were Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and they created the demon, a monster, and they thought that they will be able to control this monster, but now they became to be threatened by this monster, okay? So I think that...
We'll get back to this in a different show, because unfortunately we're very short on time and we're trying to fit all the challenges in one show. Dr. Michael?
I think that we are in a sort of dialectic reality with regard to Hezbollah. On the one hand, I think that Hezbollah is getting more and more combat experience, and they are getting better, and they improve their military capabilities and capacities, even with regard to some types of weapons. But on the other hand, and this is of course this is a threat for the state of Israel. But on the other hand, they are pretty occupied in Syria. They are pretty exhausted. And I think that they lost their popularity in Lebanon as well. Although they have achieved a political achievement with the election of the president, the Lebanese president, I think that they are pretty aware to their very sensitive political situation in Lebanon, and therefore they will be very cautious when the war in Syria will be ended. I cannot see when the war in Syria will be ended, and as long as the war in Syria is there, Hezbollah will be there and very occupied.
Dr. Michael?
I think that the most potential challenge, serious challenge or strategic challenge for Israel is Syria, because we are going to face some changes in the Golan front, and we have the Russians there. And trying to understand the Russian interests. Till now, we are in a very good level of coordinations with the Russian, but it might be changed. And if Israel will have to tackle or to face non-state actors along the Golan Front with the backing of the Iranians, then it might be very complicated.
So I'd like to thank Dr. מכאל, Mr. Oren, and Dr. Berko for coming here. And I'd like also to thank our viewers, and we will see you next week.